Ozzy Osbourne stood behind the stage curtain, leaning heavily on his cane, his black eyeliner slightly smudged from the long night. The crowd outside roared like thunder. It was his farewell concert, the end of an era. Everything felt surreal. After decades of madness, music, and mayhem, the Prince of Darkness was ready to bow out. But no one told him Axl Rose was in the building. Backstage, Sharon Osbourne paced nervously. She was always the mastermind, the one keeping Ozzy's chaos under control. Suddenly, a stagehand ran up to her and said, "He's here." "Who?" she asked. "Axl." Sharon's face froze. "What? Axl Rose?" Ozzy and Axl had never properly met, not really. They had shared stages, festivals, hotel lobbies. But they were always in different worlds. Ozzy was the unkillable godfather of metal. Axl, the wild child of rock and roll rebellion. And back in the late 80s, rumors swirled that Axl had said something about Ozzy that Sharon never forgot. That tension had lingered for over 30 years. So why was Axl here now? Ozzy took a breath, looked at Sharon, and asked, did he come to say goodbye, or start trouble? "Let's finish this." Security led Axl Rose through the backstage hallway. He wasn't the screaming maniac of old. But his swagger was still there, sunglasses on indoors, leather jacket, silver rings, and that unmistakable presence. Crew members looked at him like a ghost had walked into the room. Axl stopped by the wall where old posters of Ozzy's early tours hung. One showed a young, blood-covered Ozzy biting a bat. Axl stared at it and whispered, "That scared the hell out of me when I was a kid." Meanwhile, Sharon whispered something to Ozzy. "Do you want me to send him away?" Ozzy shook his head. "No. If he's here for a reason." The two rock legends finally stood face to face. For the first time ever. No managers. No lawyers. No bodyguards. Just two men with decades of history between them, and no idea how this conversation would go. Ozzy broke the silence. "So, you made it." Axl took off his glasses. "I heard this was the last show. I couldn't miss it." There was a beat of silence. Then Ozzy smiled. But just as things began to feel calm, Axl said something no one expected. "Back in '89, I said something I regret." Ozzy's smile faded. Sharon stiffened. Axl continued. "I said Sabbath was overrated. I was young, arrogant, stupid." The room went still. Ozzy stepped closer, looked Axl in the eyes. And then, he laughed. "You think that's the worst thing anyone said to me?" Ozzy roared. "You've never met Lemmy. One song, one chance." The tension cracked. Both men laughed. Sharon sighed with relief. But Axl wasn't done. "I didn't just come here to say sorry," he said. "I came to ask for something." Ozzy raised an eyebrow. "Let me sing with you. One song. On stage. For your last show." Sharon looked horrified. The stage manager whispered, "We're out of time. Everything's set." But Ozzy stared at Axl. The man who once insulted his band, the voice of appetite for destruction, standing here now, not as a rival, but a fan. Ozzy nodded slowly. "Only if it's Paranoid." Axl grinned. "That's the only one I know by heart." And just like that, plans changed. The crowd outside had no idea what was coming. They were there for one last glimpse of Ozzy. They didn't know they were about to witness something that had never happened before, and would never happen again. Sharon picked up the mic, "Tell the band. We're doing one more." The final act of Ozzy Osbourne's legendary career was about to turn into something no one could have scripted. The crowd goes silent. When Ozzy stepped back onto the stage, the crowd screamed. But then, a second spotlight lit up. And walking out beside him was Axl Rose. For a moment, the crowd didn't know what to make of it. Then Ozzy grabbed the mic and shouted, "This one's for the old punks, the metalheads, and the misfits, and for everyone who never fit in." The opening riff of Paranoid exploded through the arena. Axl jumped in with a howl that blended perfectly with Ozzy's voice. The two legends rocked side by side, not as rivals, but as brothers in arms. It was raw. It was loud. It was beautiful. People in the crowd cried. Others just stared in disbelief. Phones lit up like stars as fans recorded what they knew was a once-in-a-lifetime moment. Backstage, Sharon watched with tears in her eyes. Ozzy wasn't just ending his career. He was healing old wounds. Closing chapters. And proving, once again, that rock and roll isn't about grudges, it's about fire. As the song ended, Ozzy threw his arm around Axl. "I guess you ain't that bad, mate." Axl smirked. "Took you long enough." But what happened after the show is what no one saw coming. And that's where this story takes its wildest turn. Backstage confession. After the last note of Paranoid rang out, the arena shook with applause. Ozzy and Axl stood shoulder to shoulder, bathed in the blinding white lights, both slightly out of breath, but grinning like teenagers. They walked off stage to a backstage filled with wide eyes and stunned faces. A stagehand whispered, "That just broke the internet." Sharon rushed to Ozzy, wrapped him in a hug, and said, "That was insane. You pulled it off." But Ozzy barely heard her. He was looking at Axl. Something had shifted. They weren't just rock legends anymore. They were two survivors who understood what it meant to be hated, loved, broken, and rebuilt. Two men who had walked through fire, and somehow made it to the other side. Ozzy pulled Axl aside into a quiet dressing room, away from the chaos. For a moment, they just sat. No cameras. No crowd. Then Ozzy said something he hadn't told anyone outside his family. "I almost canceled tonight." Axl looked confused. "Why?" "My hands were shaking too bad this morning. Couldn't hold a fork. Doctor said maybe I shouldn't go on. My body's falling apart." Axl looked down. He nodded slowly, like he understood more than he let on. "I know what that's like," Axl said. "I used to scream so hard I'd tear my throat. Doc told me I'd lose my voice before I hit 50. I didn't believe him. Until it happened." Ozzy's eyes widened. "But you still came." Axl smiled. "You're the reason I started singing, man. I had to say goodbye in person." Ozzy looked away. He blinked hard. And then he asked, "Do you regret any of it?" Axl sat back. Thought for a moment. "I regret the time I wasted being angry. Firing people, hiding, holding grudges. But the music? Never." Ozzy nodded slowly. He whispered, "I think this was the perfect ending." But Axl suddenly leaned forward and said, "What if it's not the end?" Ozzy laughed. "You mad? My bones are made of dust." But Axl wasn't joking. "I'm not talking about touring or albums," he said. "What if we did something together? One studio session. One final track. You and me." Ozzy blinked. "A new song?" "No. A goodbye," Axl said. "But one that we write." The room went silent again. Ozzy leaned back, staring at the ceiling, his mind spinning. After all these years, could this be the final piece? A song not for charts. Not for fame. But for legacy. He looked at Axl and smiled. "Let's do it." And just like that, a new secret was born. But what they didn't know was that someone else had heard that conversation, someone with their own plan.